Okay, good morning. Indicated on the slides, we have a survey that was done in February, and we want to share with you findings on the presidency, political party, and running mates. We had a longer questionnaire, but other content will be shared in another presentation, maybe next week. Before I proceed, I just want to request anyone who's working for TIFA to raise their hands so that you can see them in case you need any help. So we have a team there. So in case you need any help, they can help you. Now, a lot of questions have been asked. Where are we doing research? Where are we doing opinion polling? I remember I was on a radio show on Monday, and they were asking me, are opinion polls beneficial? What I'd like to say is that in this season, it is important for us to have data that is informing our decision-making, either for the political leaders or for the voters. And it's only when you publish this kind of information that people know what the situation is, whether they need to work hard or whether they need to continue enhancing what they've done. What you'll actually see today is a survey that was done in February. We had a sample size of 1,500. And because we've been doing these surveys for the last 5 quarters, we'll be tracking and sharing with you those findings. Another question that is usually asked is, how did we fund the survey? So the way we do it is what you call an omnibus research. And we have a questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, we allow people to load questions. So I can get somebody loading questions on electricity. I can get somebody else loading questions on a particular FMCG product. And then at the tail end of that questionnaire, we load these opinion poll questions. So essentially, we can say that we did fund the survey because we loaded the questions at the end, but whatever questions were put on the survey were totally unrelated to politics. The other thing I'd like to request is that we'll give you a presentation at the end of this session. If you have any queries, please feel free to get in touch with me or Tom Wolf. And without wasting too much time, I'd just like to introduce Tom Wolf. I think he's not a stranger to all of you, but most importantly, is just to emphasize that he's currently working for TIFA. I worked with him at the other company for many years, and I'm quite happy that he joined TIFA. So, Tom, I'd like to request that you come and make a presentation. And as he's coming, I'd like to also invite the media houses, when you guys go back, if you ever want to load a question on our survey, something that probably will enhance your editorial value. And if you load that question, the question only belongs to your media house, please feel free to get in touch with us. Because you could actually get content that is very, very interesting and that could give you some competitive edge over and above your competitor. And
they have to pay for it.
And we don't, it's a small fee. I'm sure your management will not have a problem with that. So, Karibu Tom, take us through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Good morning, everybody. I hope some of you are people we've been working with for quite some time, but also happy to have newcomers. Interpreting survey results on any subject is always a challenge, even for those of us who have training in social science. So as Maggie said, when you're doing your stories, if you have time from your editors, please do get in touch. I don't think it's on the slide at the end, but if you would like to take my phone number, I'm happy to give it to you. It's 0733 637 023. I usually can take calls anytime up to midnight, but maybe 11 o'clock is better. And sometimes my old phone doesn't ring, so it's good to send a text just saying who you are, an SMS to that number. And then I know that if I see a missed call, I know who it is. That's fine. Also, before we get started, I saw in one of the newspapers yesterday, I think it's Azimio, saying that they're already making use of polling to help identify popular candidates for the election, all the way down to MCAs. And there was a discussion on another television channel this morning, I think represented here, and one of the issues being discussed was the challenge of party nominations. We've seen in the new amendment bill to the Political Parties Act that the Registrar of Political Parties, who I'm very proud to say was a student of mine in political science at the University of Nairobi. She's done very well in her career since. I can't take all the credit for it. She was a very bright student, Miss 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗄. That the party nominations have to be based on lists of members that have been filed with the Registrar of Political Parties to try and stop people who are not members from participating in the nominations of other parties, maybe even sometimes to sabotage them. I remember once about 20 years ago, I think it was before the 2002 election, I was taking tea at one of the hotels in town, and a group of 30 or 40 fellows came in to have tea and mandazis also, samosas, and I asked where they'd come from, and they said they just come from the nominations of one political party. And then they all got up and left in a hurry, and I said, where are you going now? They said, we're going to another one. So they were just being hired from one political party to the next to vote for whatever candidate they'd been told to or were paid to do, I don't know. So this will regulate that. I might also say very briefly that in the U.S., where I come from, every state has its own regulations for participating in party nominations. In my state, in Michigan, you do not have to be a member of any political party to participate in the nominations of that party, but you must sign a pledge that for whatever party you're going to participate in for that election, you will not participate in the nominations of any other party. I happen to be a registered Democrat. So I could participate in the Republican Party nominations, and if I did so, I would probably vote for the candidate I thought it would be easiest for our Democratic candidate to defeat, so I'd vote for a weak one, and people do that sometimes, but I have to sign that pledge that I will not then participate in the nominations of my party or any others. There are a few other ones. So every country has its own rules and regulations. But the interesting thing in the newspaper article yesterday, when azimio was saying they're going to make use of opinion polls, in some way it makes a lot of sense, because sometimes a certain candidate can be very popular among party supporters, but not among the general electorate who are going to vote on August 9th. So how you determine, if you're not going to just do a survey among your party members, in a general public, who is actually going to vote? It's a bit early, although most of the voter registration process is over, but it's still a challenge because, as we've seen in our results and is even being shown in the article today in another paper, many more Kenyans usually say, A, that they're registered than really are. A few, I don't want to use the word lie, but they cheat because wanataka kuonekana kama raia wema. And of course, more people also say that they definitely will vote when through various circumstances that doesn't always happen. Voter turnout is never as high as some of our opinion polls show. Anyway, let me start with the presentation here, and I encourage you, if I say something related to the data that doesn't make sense, please interrupt me, otherwise make a note of it, and I'll try to answer all your questions the best I can. 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨𝗧. Page down. Let's see, how do I do this? I'm pressing page down and nothing happens. Can someone help me? Oh, that one. Okay.
So this too.
Okay. Actually, not over here. Thanks. The contents of today's presentation are on the screen. As Maggie said, we have one, possibly two more presentations that we'll make from this survey. Whether we do it live like this in a hotel or whether it's just sent out to your newsrooms, Maggie will decide that. Some of the other topics that we'll cover is one I just mentioned, that is party nominations, whether people intend to participate, and if so, in what party. And we also have data on voter registration, and especially for those who are not or do not plan to register between now and August, why are they not interested in voting? We'll be putting that in the next presentation, and other issues also on perceptions of electoral fairness, how much confidence people have that the next elections will be free and fair, and so on. So that will all come later. Today we are emphasizing mainly the presidential contest, as you've seen there. As we say in the introduction, without getting into a lot of details, since we did the last survey in November, we consider there have been two major events that have taken place that would affect these numbers. Of course, there's campaign activity going on all the time, but especially the December 10th announcement by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga that he officially would contest. I mean, it wasn't official, but it was a public declaration because people were waiting him to make that statement. And then in the middle of last month, when ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi, former vice president, had his NDC, and he, together with the Ford Kenya leader, announced that they would be working together with Deputy President William Ruto in this grouping that's now called 𝗔𝗕𝗀𝗧, even if it remains unclear, very unclear, on both, for both who the running mates are going to be. It certainly appears, however, that Honorable Musalia will not be standing on his own, but he didn't rule that out either. So those are the two events that we think have mostly affected our results. And in terms of the relative standing between these two leading contenders, or horses, as you people in the media call them, as opposed to some other donkeys, it seems they've balanced each other out a little bit. Raila's coming out on December 10th and saying very clearly he's going to stand appears to have given him a boost. Likewise, the movement of Musalia and Honorable Wetangula, Senator Wetangula, to the Ruto camp seems to have given the Deputy President a bit of a boost. But because we're not interviewing the same people in every survey as a panel and asking them, have you changed who you're supporting or who you will vote for, that's a bit speculative. Okay, we begin with just sort of the general views that Kenyans gave us about the country's direction, and also related that to some presidential choices. And you can see overall that slightly more than half of all our respondents who are nationally representatives believe the country is going in the wrong direction. From left to right, beginning with the people in northern Kenya, that's the highest level of 39% who believe the country is going in the right direction, and the lowest proportion, the smallest proportion, is in lower eastern. And I should also say, we did this last time, but in our last release in November, but we didn't have a live event. TIFA are no longer using the old 8 provinces to disaggregate our national results, as you can see. A few of them are the same, such as Western and Nyanza and Coast and Nairobi. But because of the way the campaigns have been targeting different sections of the electorate, we decided to take off that section of what used to be Eastern Province around the east side of Mount Kenya and put it together with the middle and the west side of Mount Kenya and call that whole area Mount Kenya. And then we split what used to be Rift Valley really into 3 parts. We have Central Rift, which is mainly the Kalenjin and the settlement areas centered around Nakuru County. And then we have the Lower Rift, which is basically Kajiado and Narok. And then the upper part, Turkana, we've put with the whole northern part of the country, since the population up there is so small. Now, that's not to say that culturally, economically, politically, that everybody who lives in the north is similar, whether they're Somalis or Samburus, Turkanas, no. But it's just because that population grouping, even combined, is pretty small. And they have, I mean, general ecological conditions of arid, semi-arid areas, so there's quite a bit of pastoralism. We just thought that was easier. We cannot give results for all 47 counties because the statistical margin of error is too high. As you'll see, for the overall sample here of 1,541, I think it is, the margin of error is plus or minus 7. And I hope everybody knows what that means, margin of error. Very simply, it means if we ask people in the interview, have you had a cup of tea today? And 50% say yes. It means with that sample size, the real number could be 52.7 or it could be 47.3 because there's an error margin of 2.7% either above or below the figure that we get. When we break the sample down into sections, those margins of error go up higher. And that's also one reason why we don't give decimals. We just give round figures. So if it's 2.8, we call it 3% and so on. And then for people who said the country's going in the right direction or wrong direction, we asked, what's the main reason that you say that? For people who said it's going in neither right or wrong, we didn't ask them because we wouldn't know how to interpret that answer. And you could see that for people who believe the country's going in the right direction, the two most frequent responses we got were infrastructure development and the peace and stability in the country at the top, 18% each. Logically, nobody who said the country's going in the wrong direction mentioned infrastructure or peace. I mean, how could you, unless you believe that infrastructure is somehow causing traffic jams and therefore it's sending the country in the wrong direction, or you'd rather be fighting than having peace. So the zeros there are from people who believe the country is going in the right direction. Among those who think the country is going in the wrong direction, you can see nearly half, 45%, talk about just surviving the economy with regard to cost of living and inflation. Again, results are not so unexpected, but it's good to find out when people give a qualitative answer, such as right or wrong, better or worse, and so on, why they are saying so. And you can see at the bottom, only 11% either wouldn't answer the question or gave reasons that we couldn't figure out what they were trying to say. Now, we also thought, as we're moving towards an election, it would be interesting to see, is there any difference between supporters of the deputy president and of the former prime minister, the two main contenders, in where they think the country is going? And what is striking to me, especially historically, is that more than twice as many of Ruto supporters think the country is going in the wrong direction, that's 45%, than are supporters of Raila Odinga. And when I think back to the last three elections that I've been working on opinion polls, 2007, 2013, 2017, when we did this kind of a correlation, the supporters, or those said they would want Raila to be the next president or would vote for him, were always more numerous in terms of thinking things are going wrong in the country. So this is not a complete reversal, but it's quite a dramatic one when you see the difference between 21% and 45%. And I would throw this to you in the media to ask, why do you think this is? Now, for right direction, there's not much difference, but slightly more of Raila supporters think the country's going in the right direction. Is that because more of them are convinced that he will be the next president? Or are they thinking about other things when they make that judgment? You know, because there's limited time when you're interviewing people on many issues, you can't dig so deeply into every single question. Let's try one more here. We also asked people, compared to your economic position 1 year ago, how do you characterize your economic position today? Now, we see overall that only about 1 in 5 of both Raila supporters and Ruto supporters say they're better off, 21 and 18%. About the same percentage, nearly 2/3, 61, 63, say they're worse off. Now, you can interpret this however you want, but to me, basically it shows that the electorate that these two, and any other candidates for that matter, are competing for, they're basically the same. Kenyans, by and large, are in the same economic situation regardless of their political orientation. And yet we see such hard-fought contests between candidates and political parties. So if you're a Marxist economist or a Marxian economist who just follows the economic theories of the great economic and political philosopher Karl Marx, you're not going to get very far in understanding Kenyan politics. But one other point that I mentioned here in the comments, remember a year ago we were right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Things were really bad. We were having curfews, we were having lockdowns, and yet not even 2/3 of Kenyans say that, only 2/3 of Kenyans say that they're worse off now than before. Surely everybody should be better off given what the Treasury, Central Bureau of Statistics is telling us about the growth rate and so on. And yet, when people compare themselves to a year ago, almost 2/3 say now they're worse off than they were then, however bad things were then. So let this be a lesson to you macroeconomists that the figures for the economy as a whole, as put together by the National Bureau of Statistics, don't necessarily reflect the conditions that ordinary Kenyans are having. We would like to see, of course, these figures reversed, where more than half say they're better off now compared to a year ago, and only 10% or 5% are worse off. But that's not what we get. Okay, now we come to our section on political parties, which is very much in flux. And the first question we asked is, if there's any political party that you support or feel closest to, which is that? Now we got a quarter, 26%, who said none. Yani siwezi kujifahamisha ati naunga mkono chama chochote cha kisiasa, whatever. And another 3% wouldn't answer the question. But UDA is clearly the most popular party, which, as was the case in November, which is remarkable given it's also, I think, the newest one. There may have been some small parties that have been registered within the last few months that are more that are newer than UDA, but its rise is remarkable. But of course, when you see Jubilee at only 4%, and you know that Jubilee won the last election, you can understand where most of, or you can guess where UDA got most of its followers from, but we've actually explored that in more detail, and we'll get to that in a moment. When we show across the regions the distribution of party support, we see UDA is the most popular party in 5 of our 9 zones, and ODM is the most popular in 4. Again, not so surprising. It's basically a statistical tie in South Rift, as I said, which is Kajiado and Narok. 1% higher for ODM there. But, look at Coast. Many people in the media and even political analysts on television are still talking about Coast as an ODM zone. Our data did not show that. UDA is slightly more popular in the coastal region, 32 to 28. Of course, we saw an independent candidate supported by UDA win the Msambweni by-election about a year ago. Central Rift, of course, the heartland of that part of the country, overwhelmingly UDA. And in fact, only in Central Rift for UDA and only in Nyanza for ODM are these support figures a majority. That is above 50%. And when you're doing your write-ups, I hope everybody makes a clear distinction between majority and plurality. Can somebody tell me the difference? What's the definition of a plurality? can see you weren't my students at the University of Nairobi when I taught there. A plurality means the largest number in a group of numbers, but not over 50%. Majority means at least one above 50. I know your readers probably would be confused if you start talking about saying, oh, UDA has a plurality in Coast. They might think it's split into many parties. But check your dictionaries. And we basically put every party in this list that had at least 1%. Notice that a very new party, the Democratic Action Party of Kenya, DAP, has got 2% in both South Rift and Western. And, you know, in a close election, a couple of percent can make a difference. Not that, you know, we don't have quite a long time to go before that election, 6 months, but still. You may want to use these figures when you're interviewing politicians or people from different parts of the country. Keeping in mind, as I said at the beginning of this comment, subsamples, the margins of error are higher. So let's not worship the figures too much, within a range of a couple of percent. And we giving you this trend slide going back to almost 2 years now. We're not in June of this year yet, but it's like 18, 19 months. And you can see some really dramatic shifts here. Of course, the main one is what I just said, the rise of UDA in green from really nothing at the end of 2020 to being the most popular party now. And basically the collapse of Jubilee. Look at this. 40% in the middle of 2020, and in less than 2 short years, as we said, down to just 4%. Not surprising, because as we all know, Jubilee was the child of Baba na Mama, TNA and URP. I don't know which one was the mama and which was the baba, but of course, if there's been a de facto divorce, that leaves the Toto, Jubilee, more or less as an orphan. Whether it can revive, we don't know. The fact that it doesn't appear to be intending as a party to have a presidential candidate, since it's part of azimio, will mean, I think, it will be a very interesting challenge to see Jubilee's future as we get past this election. Any other really significant changes? Mainly since the middle of last year, the decline in the proportion of our respondents who would not identify with any party. When it was 56% then, and now it's down almost by half to 27%. And I'm sure, based on surveys that have been done for the last 4 elections, the closer we get to the election, the more that will drop. Once people know the full slate of presidential candidates, their running mates, how they relate to other candidates on the ground, this percentage, I would think by July, a month before the election, it should be down to maybe 5 or 8%. People will make up their minds which party they feel closest to, even if they might be identifying with more than one party for different electoral contests. But I hope you can appreciate the value of using the same methodology over time to produce such trend results, because then they're comparable from one survey to the next. Obviously, if we had more clients loading questions, we could do surveys slightly more often, and we hope to between now and the election. But I think that it's also good to let some time go by between one survey and the next, to let events take place, and then you can track and see what impact they have. The difference between a survey this week and next week, you probably get the same results unless some major event happened. Now, we also asked, because of all this movement that I just showed you, we asked, in the last 10 years, is there any other political party you supported, if you're supporting one now, or even if you didn't support any at all, if you're not supporting any now? And you can see that amazingly, more than half, a clear majority, 55% said yes. Within the last 10 years, there's another party, if I'm supporting one now, that I used to support. And if people gave us the names of more than one party, maybe they went from PNU, and then they jumped to Jubilee, and then they went to KANU, and then we asked them, well, what's the most recent one you supported? We'll come to that in a second. And you could see that, again, in Central Rift, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nandi, all those places, Bomet, Don, that's where we have the highest percentage who used to support another party, 70%. How you build political parties in a country when the party affiliation or loyalties and memberships are changing so much from one election to another. I know there's some NGOs, some with international donor support, working with parties. I think that's probably a very good occupation to have, because utakuwa na kazi kila uchaguzi, sababu kuna vyama tofauti tofauti, wanachama wanahama nini. Kwa hivyo, there's plenty of work to be done there. And I'm not saying that work isn't useful. If somebody gets trained in party organization with one party, and then you go to another party, you take that skills and experience with you. So hakuna ubaya hapo. And then we asked all those 55% who said yes, there was another party they used to support, which one was it? And to no surprise, more than half say the party I used to support was Jubilee, 57%. But you can see that most of the other parties have also had some attrition, ODM being second. Of all the people who now support a different party, or support none, compared to another party they supported in the last 10 years, 1 in 5, 22% used to support ODM. Why have they left? But again, that helps to explain. Just looking at current supporters of UDA, just looking at them, of which there are 420, as you can see in the base down here. We asked, where did you come from? Where was your last political party home? And again, no surprise, 3/4 came from Jubilee, because the leader of UDA is the DP, and he was one of the Baba or Mama who, waliza Jubilee. So that's no surprise. But even 14%, look at that, of those who currently support UDA said they came out of ODM. Which also helps to explain why UDA is currently, as we showed you a few minutes ago, a more popular political party at the moment than ODM. And you can see some of UDA's current supporters came from some of the smaller parties as well. And we did this also just asking those people who said, kwa hivi sasa hakuna chama chochote naunga mkono. There were only 184 of them, but we asked them the same question. Nambaleni, which political party did you support or feel close to? And as I said, if they gave more than one, we asked for the most recent. Again, more came from Jubilee, or used to be in Jubilee, than any, but they haven't yet decided, because now they're supporting none. Hawajamua. Many supported 30%, almost a third of these who now support none, used to support ODM. Why? Why are they not still in ODM? So we asked this question, why do you no longer support the party you used to, just to those two groupings? To those who used to support Jubilee here, and those who used to support ODM. And you can see quite a contrast in the reasons. Among those who support Jubilee, by far, more of them, more than a quarter, 26% said because the party is split in two. Not surprising. Strange to me, though, another 18%, they said, Hakuna Jubilee Tena. Now, maybe they were just being, it no longer exists. We know Jubilee is still there. 4% of our respondents belong to it. As far as I know, Honorable Tuju is still the, Secretary General. But in the minds of at least some supporters of Jubilee and ODM, Hakuna Jubilee Tena, 18% of those who used to support Jubilee said they left it because, as far as they are concerned, it's not there. And you know, when a respondent gives you an answer, it's rude to say, you're wrong, it's still there. But I thought that was quite interesting. Now, of those who have left ODM, however, we also have quite a few who said, Hata katika uchaguzi wowote hawapati ushindi. 14% said they lose, or it's become weak. Only 3% said that for Jubilee, among those who used to support Jubilee. We had quite a few who wouldn't give any response. Oh, look at this one. No longer like or respect the party leader. 9% of those who used to support ODM but now don't support any party. Sorry, whether they support any other party or not. This is all of them. They say they've lost confidence in the leader of that party. Only 4% of those who used to support Jubilee said they don't have confidence in the leader as their reason, their main reason, because this was a single response question. And you can see some other small reasons here and there. I mean, if any of you are currently working on a postgraduate degree at the university, you can just do your whole thesis on something like this. So interesting. Okay, any questions about that section? Any hands? No. You can ask at the end if a question comes to you. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, so now we get to the presidential election. Who do Kenyans prefer the next president to be? And who do they think the current president, Uhuru Kenyatta, who they think he wants the next president to be? And let's just to be very clear, we did not ask who are you going to vote for, because that gets into a whole issue. Are you a registered voter? Are you really going to vote? We just asked everybody, who would you like the next president to be? And we have an 11% advantage for the deputy president over the former prime minister, 38 to 27. A few proportions for former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka and former Vice President Musalia Mudavadi, 2% for other, but we have 30% who didn't give us an answer. And that's the reason why neither Ruto or Raila are over 50%. Because we had 30% who, for whatever reasons, well, 20% said hawajamua. The other 10%, they just said, hiyo swali sitaki kujibu, ama tuendelee na, kunihoji nini. They wouldn't give us an answer for whatever reason. Maybe those 10% are also, sorry, this should be 10% here, not 11. It's my typing error. Whether they're actually undecided as well, and they were shy to admit it, we don't know. Spread across the zones that we're using, you see the figures we just gave you on the far left under total, and then we have arranged these zonal figures from left to right, showing where the deputy president is highest in Central Rift at 61% and lowest in Nairobi at 21%. On the other side, Raila is highest in Nyanza, followed by Nairobi, and then South Rift. But note that even in Nyanza, he does not score a majority. He's not above 50%. We still have 1 in 5, 19% in Nyanza, who didn't give us an answer, and another 9% who also didn't give an answer. So that's 28% from Nyanza who didn't answer the question with a name. Again, why people haven't made up their minds? It may be for reasons that we'll show in a minute. Whoops. Screen went off. Is there a way of fufushing this? I hope it's not a battery problem.
Just switch over for now.
Is it connected to power?
Yeah.
It is. Do you want to use mine? Oops. Is this right? Okay. Yes. Sorry for that little hiccup. And just to be clear, for all of these questions, we've tried to give you at the bottom of the screen, in quotation marks, the verbatim question in English. Most of the interviews were in Swahili, but we just thought it was easier for the presentation to put the questions in English. And we also indicate whether the responses, the names, the choices of the answers were read out or not. And you can see this is a single response people could give, but we didn't read off names. Do you want to vote for, do you want so-and-so to be the next president? Do you want so-and-so? No. We just let people, unprompted, tell us who they wanted the next president to be. Let's see, this is my page down. Okay, and here we calculated the change of our results from the last survey in November and this current one to see who has gained or lost where. Overall, you can see that the former Prime Minister has an increase of 4% from what he had in November. The Deputy President, 0. Overall, no change from his 38%. But that doesn't mean that things haven't been changing on the ground. In fact, if you didn't look at the totals, and I just showed you these, you would think the numbers must be very different from last time. But they tend to balance each other out, and also remember that every one of these zones has quite a different population. Nairobi alone has 11 or 12% of the country's population, and it's one of only 47 counties. So you can see that there's been a gain for both of them in the Central Rift region of 4%. You can see at the coast, the Deputy President has lost 4, and the former Prime Minister has gained 4, and so on. Most striking in Lower Eastern, which is basically Ukambani, there's been a shift really of 15%, with the Deputy President losing 11% of support, and the former Prime Minister gaining 4, and so on. Also in Nairobi, the Deputy President has lost quite a bit. Whether that was mainly the impact of Raila's announcement that he's really going to be campaigning for the presidency, more people in Nairobi follow the news, or whether it's been the impact of certain campaign activity or whatever. We didn't ask people, as I said, why have you changed? And because these are different people being interviewed in each survey, it's not like a panel where we can say, last week you told me your favorite food is spaghetti, now you're telling me it's ugali. Why have you changed? You can only do that if you have the same people in every survey. Also, I would say, as a comment, even with the two-party leaders of ANC and Ford Kenya moving into the hustler nation, Raila has done better since last November in Western than Ruto has. 8% better for the Prime Minister. But they're continuing to campaign, both teams, so we'll have to wait to the next survey and see how things work out. And again, the trend slide, going back to the middle of 2020, a couple of things which we think are notable. Starting at the top, the remarkable consistency of Deputy President Ruto's figures statistically really unchanged over all 5 surveys. Not quite at 40%. We see a big jump for the former Prime Minister from the middle of last year. It came up dramatically up till last November, but as we just said, he's gained another 4% between November and now. Undecideds, still around 1/5. No responses were very high in the middle of last year. Now they're down to 10%. So really not many other changes. The other candidates basically hugging the bottom, not very far above 0. So I guess from one point of view, the question is, what does the deputy president have to do to statistically, in a measurable way, increase his popularity, to get above 40? And another question is, can the former Prime Minister continue his upward trend? Especially, as I said about political parties, as this 20% of undecided, it's got to go down based on past history of surveys. Especially once, as I said before, or several times, we know the final list of presidential candidates and their running mates. For all the people who are undecided, we ask them, what's the main thing you need to know to make up your mind that you don't know now? And you can see quite a variety of answers, as I've been saying. More information about the candidates' policies, the plurality, 44%. But 31% said they weren't sure what they're waiting for, which to me seems quite surprising. Maybe there were so many things they were waiting for they couldn't pick the main one. That's possible. 9%, lower left-hand corner, they said, we actually need to see the menus. Ukiingia hoteli kuagiza chakula mpaka waiter anakupatia orodha huwezi kuagiza sababu hujui wapishi wamepika nini. So you need to know what's on the ballot, on the menu, before you can make up your mind. 9% said that's the main reason. That doesn't mean people didn't have more than one reason. People want to have a better idea of which candidates will actually fulfill their promises, 2%. Running mates, I already mentioned. Guidance from family, friends, or elders, 5%, or is that 3%? 3%. So it'll be very interesting, again, moving to our next surveys to see not only what percent goes down among the undecided, but what reasons people give for those who are still undecided who they're going to vote for. For everyone who did not say they want the deputy president to be the next president, and for everyone who didn't say that they prefer that the former prime minister be the next president, we asked what's the main reason to expose or to identify what we call the negatives. In the U.S. election in 2016, people were asking, why are you not voting for Hillary? Or why are you not voting for Trump? And so on. And you can see the main reasons that people gave, but nearly half of our respondents would not give a reason, whether they weren't voting for Raila or weren't voting for Ruto. For whatever reasons, they declined to give reasons. So these are just the 5 main ones that we were given. By those who didn't say they want Raila to be the next president, the plurality was his age. For those who didn't mention the deputy president as their preferred next president, a plurality, almost the same, said he's been allegedly associated with corruption. Whether either of these candidates can do anything to convince the people who have these views to vote for them anyway, that's the challenge of campaigning. And that's why you see them spending so much energy and resources over the next 6 months. Then we asked people, as I said earlier, well, whoever you want the next president to be, who do you think the current incumbent at State House wants the next president to be? And overwhelmingly, if you just look at the purple, nearly 2/3, 63% say they think the president wants Raila Odinga to be the next president. Among Raila supporters, this goes all the way up to 83% of those who want him to be the next president think that's who Uhuru wants also. Rather fewer of those who support the deputy president, only 67%, also believe that the president prefers Raila. So there are majorities, above 50%, for all those categories. Total, all our respondents, and those who prefer the deputy president and former prime minister. Interestingly, there are still 17% of the supporters of the DP who thinks that the president wants him to be his successor, whether he said so openly or not. But only 1% of those who support Raila, oh, pole. Ay, shikayo. Thank you. Only 1% of those who support the former prime minister believe that the president supports his deputy. 17% versus 1? I hope you can do an interesting story and explain why that is. 17 times more of Ruto supporters think that's who the president really wants than do Raila supporters. Incredible. Well, maybe not incredible, but still very, very dramatic. Sorry, I hope I haven't messed anything up here. Oops, sorry. Okay, the trend for this one. Wow, just look at what's happened over the last 18, 19 months. Way back in the middle of 2020, 42%, 41% of our respondents weren't sure who the president wants. Now only 14% are not sure. Back then, only 17% thought that the president preferred Raila. Now overall it's 65%. Back then, 19% thought that he preferred his deputy. And now it's down, as you've seen, to only 8%. So, you people live in Kenya. These changes in Kenyans' perceptions of who they think the president wants to be his successor will not surprise you, but we still think it's a very good way of capturing our recent history to show how the perceptions, the understandings of Kenyans change based on what's going on in the political world. And that's not to say that all Kenyans pay the same amount of attention to politics. Watu wengine wanashughulika zaidi na kulisha ng'ombe, kulima shamba, nanini. They don't follow things the way you do, or Maggie and I do, because it's part of our work. But still, this kind of tracking over time, I think, really captures the impression that the Kenyan public gets of where the president stands. And remember, the survey was done just before last week, when the president was actually out almost openly campaigning for the former prime minister. Okay, then we get to this question about running mates. And as we said earlier, quite a few people are waiting to make up their minds who they want the next president to be and who they would vote for. They want to see the running mates. And as we've seen on many talk shows, newspaper articles, and discussions, under the new constitution, people have realized that we no longer have a president and an assistant. We have a presidency that includes two very important leaders who are part of a team. Like Siamese twins, they're stuck together, whether they're happy or not, unless one of them resigns or leaves office for some other reason. And I just want to say a word about this word best. There was another discussion a couple of weeks ago, I think it was on one of the morning programs, discussing what Kenyan voters consider when they think about a deputy president. And there were a number of categories that were mentioned. First one is, God forbid, should the president die or become so ill that the office of the president becomes vacant and the deputy president takes over, how good would he or she be in running the country on a day-to-day basis? That's one criterion. Another criterion is, there's no vacancy in the presidency, but how well do the two work together during the next 5 years after they're elected? And that's a current issue because of what we've seen been going on lately here. How do they work together? Yet another issue, of course, is how many more votes can that deputy bring in to the president in an election? Just in terms of winning. Even if, perhaps, they wouldn't get along very well, or again, God forbid, if the deputy took over, it might be a terrible leader. So the most immediate criterion is best in terms of adding more votes. And that's the way we framed our question. Who do you think would be the best deputy presidential running mate for William Ruto, Raila Odinga, in terms of bringing additional votes? Not working together after they win, or taking over the presidency if it becomes vacant. We just tried to restrict the minds of our respondents to A. And we actually read off a list of names so that some of our respondents who wouldn't know all the people being considered, and let them pick one. So you can see on the side of the deputy president, we had a clear plurality. 27% thought his best pick should be former Vice President Musalia Mudavadi. And this really, I'm sure if we'd done this survey before the ANC Delegates Conference where Mudavadi and Wetangula joined the Hustler Nation, this figure wouldn't have been anything like this. On the other side, overwhelmingly, but not quite a majority, Peter Kenneth was identified, after all these names were read out for both, as being Raila's best running mate in terms of those additional votes. We made that very specific in the question. Now, people who study political parties in Kenya won't be surprised to see that some people were identified as the best running mate for both of them. We've got Kalonzo Musyoka, especially, 18%, the second most frequent mentions on the Raila side. But 8% mentioned him as the best running mate for the DP also, in terms of bringing votes. And we also see that there are a number of women who also get fairly high mention. On the deputy president side, Kirinyaga governor and Waiguru, the second most frequent mention or identification of a good running mate to bring in more votes. Whereas on Raila's side, two women come in third and fourth place. Honorable Martha Karua and Kitui Governor Charity Ngilu. And we have other women mentioned, Alice Wahome and Sabina Chege also on either side. So women are definitely in the minds of some of our respondents. Whether when people mention a woman's name, it's because they think that will help bring in the Wanawake vote, or they're just thinking about them in terms of, in general, bringing in even men. It's not really clear. Across the regions, when we look at the identified best running mate for the former Prime Minister, and this is just picking the 5 most frequent mentions. We can see that Peter Kenneth was mentioned most in Central Rift, South Rift, Nairobi, and Nyanza. In Lower Eastern, it was 𝗏𝗀𝗄𝗎 Musyoka. Not surprising, that's where he comes from. So there may be a bit of wish fulfillment there. But it is true that as the leader of the Wiper Party, it seems that the former Vice President, Honorable Musyoka, does have a considerable base in Lower Eastern that would most likely, most of them would go along towards Raila if he became the running mate again for the 3rd time. And you can see this distribution. Honorable Martha Karua is strongest in Central Rift, comes in 2nd place there after Peter Kenneth. Also around Mount Kenya, slightly, well, statistically the same, tied with former governor and current CS Agriculture Peter Munya. They both score quite well around the mountain. Yeah. Western, pretty divided between Peter Kenneth and 𝗏𝗀𝗄𝗎 in terms of those people who they think would bring in the most votes for Raila, and so on. Sorry. Turning to the Deputy President, we can see, as I showed you on the far left, overall, Musalia is seen as the best for bringing in more votes, and Musalia is clearly seen as the most useful in terms of votes in most of the regions, starting in Western, where he comes from, 40%, South Rift 38, Coast 38, Lower Eastern 38, Nairobi 31, and Northern 28, and so on. So I don't think there is a single zone here in which, well, only around Mount Kenya, is the former Vice President Musalia not mentioned more than anybody else, and that's where Governor Waiguru scores more, 20% versus 15% for Mudavadi. I should also say in Central Rift, Honorable 𝗔𝗕𝗎𝗄𝗎 does pretty well at 23%, but he does much less well on the mountain. I think he's coming from Mathira, but he has only 8% in the Mount Kenyan. He does very well in the South Rift, though, 28%. And he also comes in 2nd in Western at 14%. So as far as Kenyans are concerned, he shouldn't be ruled out either. We also wanted to put a specific focus on potential female running mates for the leading candidates. And that is for people who didn't already mention a woman, and we actually combined their results into this calculation. For Raila, Martha Karua, Honorable Karua, is the most frequently mentioned best running mate among women by everyone, and as well between men and women. But interestingly, more men, 50%, think she would be the ideal running mate for him in terms of bringing in votes than do women, who are 35%, not that far away from women who mentioned Governor Ngilu, and the rest, just 3% in total. Honorable Sabina Chege certainly is there, but at 7%, only about a quarter of Governor Ngilu's mentions, and a fifth or less of those for Honorable Karua. Sorry. By the regions, I don't think I have to go through all of this. You can look at that in more detail. Just to say that Honorable Karua does the best with clear majorities in two of these regions, Central Rift and Mount Kenya. Of course, she comes from Mount Kenya, from 𝗓𝗓𝗓. But only in Nyanza and Tide Coast does Governor Ngilu, it's only in Nyanza where Governor Ngilu does better than Honorable 𝗓𝗓𝗓. For the Deputy President, as you already saw, in the list of all perceived best running mates, even particularly with the men, Governor Waiguru is by far ahead. 40% overall, no difference statistically between men and women in their perception of that. Followed, interestingly, by former Cabinet Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Martha Karua. Now, this has nothing to say whether Honorable Karua would be equally happy being a running mate for either candidate. That's another issue. But we can also see that Honorable Alice Wahome has a fair number of mentions when respondents are restricted to naming a woman as a possible running mate for the Deputy President. And then we have these across the regions where Governor Waiguru does very well in Lower Eastern, a clear majority, also very strong in Central Rift, Coast, Mount Kenya, our home place, and even in Nyanza, 40%. There is no of these 9 zones in which Honorable Karua gets more than a quarter. She scores highest in Western at 24%. Specifically looking at the Mount Kenya region, and of course, since the current president comes from this region, this zone, and is not allowed to contest by the Constitution, and we don't have, as of yet, a major candidate coming from this region, this zone, we thought, let's look at running mates from this zone in particular. And for the Deputy President, again, Governor Waiguru scores the highest, followed by Honorable 𝗓𝗓𝗓, and then Honorable Nyoro, and the rest. And across the regions, again, we're giving you this detail to analyze, but I don't think we need to discuss it here. Who would be best for the former Prime Minister from this zone? Overwhelmingly, but not quite a majority, Honorable Peter Kenneth, former Assistant Minister, again followed by Honorable 𝗓𝗓𝗓, with several other names also mentioned. Now, of course, when the decision is made by these presidential candidates to pick their running mate, sure, getting the most votes is the most immediate need. But you have to think, who are you going to be most comfortable and productive working with for the next 5 years? And for the good of the country, in the event, God forbid, that that person has to take over the presidency, who could do the best job of leading the country? You must consider all of those criteria. Again, we'll leave this distribution for you to look at in more detail if you want to explore them in your newsrooms. And that brings us to the end. I think we could just say, number one, the political situation in Kenya remains fluid. As we said, we still have 20% for the presidential race who are undecided, another 5 or 8% who wouldn't give us a response. We don't know who's going to vote, how many people are actually going to turn out. We don't know who the running mates are. The final registration of voters hasn't been audited yet, so we're not even sure finally how the distribution of registered voters will be. When we get closer to the election and we know that, then we can limit our surveys to those who are registered, proportioned not based on the last census, as this one is, but based on the IEBC register. And then finally, what I said at the beginning, whether privately, confidentially, or in public, it seems that more politicians, political parties, campaign teams are making use of surveys as science. And we think that as a survey firm, when TIFA does this and presents our results, as Maggie said at the very beginning, we think that's also a useful part of civic education, that people know in general how their favorite candidates are faring, what are the issues that people are concerned with, whether I've already made up their mind who they want to support or not. And maybe finally, I would just say that, well, just before I make my final comment, according to the Publication of Electoral Polls Act, you people know that you will violate that act if you don't include this information, which was included today in the Star's article about their results on how the survey was done and so on. And also some of the main demographics. This shows you how we distributed the 47 counties into the 9 zones that we're using. I'm sorry. And then the demographics of our sample. And again, you can check these up against the census to make sure that the sample is not biased in a way that would affect the results. Yeah, I would just, again, for my sort of final concluding comment there. We know there are a lot of assertions that showing one candidate to be in the lead creates a bandwagon effect, where not only people are undecided, but even some who would otherwise vote for somebody else will say, I want to be with the winner for whatever reason. But when we look at the results of surveys before the last 3 elections, 2007, 2013, 2017, the results don't show that. One example that Maggie gave on her radio program interview on Monday was about 2007, when a number of different firms before the 2007 election. Well, first in 2005 and 6, they were showing 𝗓𝗄𝘂 way ahead of Raila. And remember, Raila, some of you are too young, but that's when Raila said, well, the only reason he's leading is because he has a pretty face. But that wasn't the reason. The reason was most people were expecting that by the time we got to the 2007 election, the Constitution would have been changed and we would have a position of Prime Minister. Raila and ODM were supporting a change from a presidential to a parliamentary system, in which Raila made it very clear he wanted to be the second Prime Minister of Kenya after the first one, Jomo Kenyatta, who was Prime Minister before Kenya became a republic, and the Prime Minister position was eliminated, and we had a president instead. And it wasn't really until the end of 2006, after the Wako draft constitution had been defeated in the 2005 November referendum, that most of Raila's supporters now agreed or realized, hakuna kutakuwa na waziri mkuu, and that's when Raila overtook 𝗓𝗄𝘂. So that by the time of the last surveys that Maggie and I were involved in at the Stedman Group in December of 2007, Raila was at like 44, 45%. 𝗓𝗄𝘂 was only at 10%, 9% actually. And in the election itself, the EC gave 𝗓𝗄𝘂 exactly that, 9 or 10%. And as she mentioned on air, after the election, after the violence was over, in the middle of 2008, I went to Machakos, just by the Matatu stage there, after having a very nice lunch at the Tea-Tot restaurant that have the biggest and best chapatis in Kenya, as far as I know. I was interviewing people just waiting for vehicles, just kubatisha, and I was asking people, did you see any opinion polls before the last election? I found 10 or 15 people who said yes. And I could tell they were all Kamba. And I asked them, do you remember what they said? And they all said yes. Kibaki na Raila walikuwa hivi na 𝗓𝗄𝘂. I said, 𝗓𝗓𝗄 alikuwa around what? They said 10%. I said, and who did you vote for in that election? Wote. All of them said we voted for 𝗓𝗄𝘂. I said, Lakini, did you not believe those polls were accurate? You thought he could actually win and do better than the polls were showing? Said hapana. Lakini tulikuwa tunamjenga kwa uchaguzi ujao. Hata Kibaki amejaribu mara tatu. Na tena ni mtu wa kwetu. So knowing that Kalonzo was only scoring 9 or 10% did not discourage those people from voting for him. And that's why he got basically just what the polls had shown. So we didn't see any bandwagon effect. Now, whether the polls in any way affect people's choices, it may be. But we need to see the research. So it's a challenge to my former colleagues at the University of Nairobi to encourage some of their students, if they're interested in the impact of polls on actual voters' choices, to give us some science before people make these wild assertions that TIFA or anybody else is trying to sway people in one direction or another, even by presenting accurate results, because we haven't seen that in reality. Okay, I've gone on for a long time. I know you want to get to your newsrooms, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you're referring to any results, tell me the topic, and I'll go back to that slide so we can all be looking at it. Hakuna maswali hata moja. I've never, good. And please introduce yourself and say where you're coming from, which media house.
Japan come out from NTV Citizen.
Thank you.
Okay, from your survey, you have said Ruto's and Raila's popularity in central Kenya indicated central Kenya and Mount Kenya. What's the difference?
Wait a minute. Let's go back.
You want to know the difference between the regions?
That's central Kenya and Mount Kenya.
Oh,
No, it's a regional slide. The last slide.
the last slide.
Okay, let me do it for you.
Sorry, down to the bottom.
And president. And it's this
And
one.
go up. So, yes,
So
for our
sorry.
Mount Kenya region, you can see these are the counties that are included.
Let me highlight them in white. I don't think the font
Is that clear? And as I said, because people have been in the political community have been talking about the Mount Kenya vote basket. So we thought it would be more useful to even put these Mount Kenya East counties in the Mount Kenya grouping rather than have Embu, Meru, Tharaka Nithi, and so on combined with Ukambani as well as the northern counties of Isiolo, Samburu, and Marsabit. So we try to, it's not a perfect categorization, but we thought in terms of what's going on in the political world, in terms of campaign strategy, it makes more sense. Does that answer your question, or? It does, thank you. Good question. Obviously, if we had, yes, if we had enough clients loading questions on other topics so that we could interview 15 or 20,000 people instead of 1,500, we could give you results for some of these counties individually. But most of the work that we get from politicians who are running for governor or senator, they want to use the results confidentially, so we don't release those. We just do the work for them, give them the results, as I'm sure some other survey firms are doing, and let them speak for themselves. Yes?
Yes, so my name is Alphas Lagat, and
Yes, we see you all the time on TV.
Yeah, we see that you're really prominent on Raila and Ruto.
Yes.
Of course, there's been this complaint by the One Kenya Alliance that it's not a two-horse race, as it were. From your survey, is it then that Kenyans are not taking the OCA seriously, or they prefer that the One Kenya Alliance joins either the Ruto and Raila camp? Is that what you find?
Well, you know, it's not, that's a very good question and a legitimate one, but 𝗔𝗕𝗀 𝗡𝗲𝗄, we are just giving you what our respondents tell us. And up to now, as far as I know, OCA has not stated its clear position. From people like you, and we're grateful to you for giving us information, there is pressure on the former Vice President Kalonzo to link up with the former Prime Minister, with Raila. We also have this, sort of Mount Kenya group that Honorable Karua was associated with. Now she's moving a bit closer to OCA as maybe an alternative. Again, we're not trying to downplay any particular formation, grouping, or candidate. It's just reporting the results that we get. And as I said, I don't know if you were here, it seems to me, and this came out in our results, the reason that nearly 1/3 of our respondents didn't give us a name is they're waiting to see the menu from the kitchen, and then they'll decide. And the menu includes, as I said, two main things. What's the final list of all presidential candidates, and who are their running mates? So baru ni mapema sana. Things can happen. Especially given the fact that at the level of policies, there doesn't seem to me to be a huge difference in these political formations. Yes, we've got bottom-up Hustler Nation on one side, we've got, Peso Fukoni, whatever, on the other, and so on. That was ANC, and of course was Raila with his stipends to households, 6,000 a month, whatever. But as we showed here, they're basically competing for the same electorate. The Kenyan society that we have, I don't blame the politicians or the parties. The Kenyan society we have is not nearly as differentiated enough so that we have workers, we have employers, we have landlords versus people who are renting, we have farmers who are growing versus people who are importing food that could organize themselves in competing parties. I mean, in countries like England and the US that have basically two-party systems, in winner-take-all systems, even there, we have a general difference between more working-class people who are Democrats or Labor, and wealthier people, generally, who are Republicans or conservative, landowners and so on. In parliamentary systems, like in Israel, like in Germany, Austria and so on, where we have coalition governments, each party has a much clearer link to a certain part of society, like the Greens in Germany. Those people who are sent to the Bundestag, to the parliament in Germany on the Green Party, environment, stopping pollution, stopping global warming, climate change, that's what those people stand on. That's their main platform manifesto, and that's what they go and do. It doesn't mean they don't have ideas about other issues, but when people vote for them, the voters are saying, this is our priority. Now, do we have a party in Kenya of coastal fishermen? No. In a parliamentary system, we might, where even if coastal fishermen, together with Nyanza, Lake Victoria fishermen, might elect 6 MPs. But when they came to Bunge, they would know, ni wajibu wetu kutetea, masilahi ya wavuvi, because those are the people who elected us. So we know what our party stands for. But as long as every party is trying to be national, it just becomes the lowest common denominator. And as we've seen, the same percent of Kenyans say that they're worse off now than they were a year ago. I gave a presentation a couple of years ago to the 2030, Vision 2030 annual meeting. Because one of the political pillars in that Vision 2030 is to have issue-based politics and issue-based parties. And I told them, and there were like 150 people there from various government departments and some organizations that work. And I said, as far as I know, you can have the most, the best chef in the world. But if the people in the restaurant are Muslim and he's cooking pork, they're not going to eat it, because Muslims don't eat pork. So if you want issue-based politics in this country, you better get away from this presidential system and go to a parliamentary proportional representation system, even a party list one, where people know, whatever party, how big or small, what do they actually stand for. And you might find wheat farmers or maize farmers in the Rift who have a party for people who are producing cash crops, something like that. But in a system like this, and then what's the result? I'm sorry to say, or maybe not sorry, but in a system where everybody is going for basically the same type of voter in terms of the economy, then of course ethnic identity becomes even more important.
But also you've heard of sure you've heard from numerous rallies
Yes.
of state project, people's project, and whatnot, and across the divide. I just wanted to know, is there a net effect of a presidential candidate being perceived, as a project, or perceived support from the president? Does it tilt the scales in whichever direction?
Sorry. Let me see if I can get this. I have to tell you, I mean, I'm glad you asked that question. As I said when I presented this slide, when we asked all those who did not identify, to come to your question, the former Prime Minister is their preferred candidate. And this was a single response. We only put in this slide the 5 reasons that were given the most. But there were a few percent who said he's somebody's project. Now, if we asked everybody who did not name Raila as their preferred next president, do you think he's a project? Who knows what percent would have said yes? Maybe 20, maybe 60? You know, your guess is as good as mine. But your guess is as good as mine. But it would certainly, it would be something more than the 2 or 3% that we got in a single response question. But I think you put your finger on one very interesting aspect of this campaign, and I'm speaking just as an observer of politics, not on behalf of TIFA. Each of the 2 main candidates have some interesting challenges. And on the deputy president's side, there are some people, I wouldn't quantify, who are not happy that he's no longer appearing to be very comfortable with his boss. There are some. On the deputy president's side, there are some, and we saw this together with right here. Why people who used to support Jubilee, ODM in the past, are not supporting it now. Lost confidence in the party leader, changed policies. They don't think it's even viable anymore. On the one hand, it's clear the former Prime Minister wants to get all the benefit he can from the support of the President to the extent that the President is willing to openly give it. On the other hand, given that most Kenyans think the country is going in the wrong direction, he has to show he also is offering change. Both of them are promising change. No one is saying, mambo ya alivio ni sawa kabisa. So they're both trying to address the needs that Kenyans have, mainly economic, but others also, but doing it from very different positions with regard to the current head of state and president of the country, which makes this election, from the point of view of, again, political science, very, very, if not unique, very fascinating. So, you've put your finger on an issue, and I'm sure that's one, as your job as a reporter, with your editors and your other colleagues, will be continuing to pursue. We could have a cup of tea and talk about this. As long as you don't quote me, I could give you my, more detailed views.
Fair enough.
I might also say, without trying to brag or anything, it doesn't give me more knowledge than anybody else. The first election I saw in Kenya was 1969, when I was a volunteer teacher at the coast. That was one party. KPU had been banned after Mboya's assassination and the violence in Kisumu, when Jomo Kenyatta, president, went there. In the 1969 election, I was away for the 74 one. I was back for 79 election. In those 3 elections, in a way, there was more debate about policy than there is now, especially in 69 and 74, because Kenya was still a young country. What its relationship would be to the Kenya that existed as a British colony was still being debated very actively in Parliament, within KANU. We had KANU A, KANU B. We had all of the 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗪 people from Ngala and Moi who had joined KANU when it folded in 1964, end of 64. So there was a very, very active debate at the university and in the political class, and as I say, in Bunge. The Cold War was on. Do we want to be more allied with the British and the Americans in the West, more allied with the Soviets and the Chinese in the East, or do we want to be neutral as the third world neutrality community and so on? Much more vibrant debate than there is now about policies, both international relations and with regard to the economy. So that is a limiting of the space in which Kenyan politicians and parties operate, which is not their fault. It's not something they can control. With globalization and free trade and whatever, you know, it's... do we have any party that says we want to stop cheap imports from wherever they come so we can revive manufacturing by having a lot of tariffs? I don't hear that. So it makes it difficult for politicians to distinguish each other without becoming more personal or ethnic or whatever. That's the reality. It's not 100%. We can still have room for policy innovation. Both sides are going to have to come up with some more to attract voters. But that's a great question. Any others? Maybe the last thing that I'll say is that you've seen in the Star, the Radio Africa poll that's come out today, and you've seen some others before, and you'll see some more from different companies. Let me give you a very short list as to some of the reasons why the results of these surveys can differ. And I hope you'll please write these down. Number one, why do surveys on the same subjects, how can their results differ? Number one, they were conducted on different dates. So things may have changed out there, even from one week to the next. That's one reason. Number two, the sampling methodology wasn't the same. So that the proportion of Kenyans from different parts of the country, or from different genders, or from different education levels, or education, or ethnic group, or whatever, differs. The samples are different. Number three, the precise wording of the questions was not identical. For example, who do you want the next president to be? Who are you going to vote for? It's not the same question. Number four, when people didn't give an answer immediately, the interviewers did not use the same level of pressure or encouragement for people to give an answer. So if I ask you, what's your favorite food? And you say, I have many, I can't decide. So I'm an interviewer, I write on Undecided. But another interviewer can say, come on, in the last month, what's the food you've had most that you like? And then you tell me, oh, 𝗔𝗕𝗎𝗪, or whatever it is. So how active the interviewer is in squeezing the respondents to get an answer can also... So there are a number of different reasons why these surveys, the survey results can differ. Again, another could be the sequence in which the questions are asked. That's number 5 or 6. Because sometimes, if I ask a question, for example, who do you think would be the best female running mate for Raila and Ruto? And then I ask, who do you think, between men and women, which is the best running mate? You're more likely to mention a woman, because I've just put your mind in the previous question on who would be the best woman running mate. So in a way, I've affected your thinking. I've pushed you in a direction of thinking of a woman because of the order of the questions. So when you are comparing the results of different surveys, oh, and then the last one is the size of the sample. Even if for the whole sample, the size of the sample doesn't make that big of a difference. If you're going to do to sections of the sample, like zones, or comparing people at different income level. Obviously, the margin of error is going to be higher when you have a sample of 1,000 or 2,000 versus when you have 20,000, if anybody can afford such a survey. So try to keep those different factors in mind when you're seeing surveys that give different results. Great. Sasa bwana Lagata, na kudai chai na mahamri, eh? Haya. Any other good questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. I think there's some refreshments outside. If you don't have to run back to your newsroom immediately, take 5 minutes and have a little snack. And please, as you're doing your stories, if you need any follow-up information from us, get in touch. We'd be happy to try our best to answer your questions. Sawa. Asanteni. Karibuni vionjo hapo nje.